Hello there. Why don't you take a seat and tell me what appears to be the problem? Okay, so I have 4 questions for Consult the Doctor. They're a mix of very practical to somewhat more philosophical, and I thought that might be fun. So I'm just writing down the timestamp. The first question was, how have YouTube changes affected the way you upload or promote videos? Well, if you're not an active person on YouTube, and what I mean by that is you don't upload your own videos, but you only watch the work of others, you may not be aware that uploading a YouTube video is not simple. It used to be, over a decade ago, very simple. But currently, to upload a single video, I have to click through, I believe, 6 screens on which I have to set multiple parameters. Now, some things, I don't know how interesting this is, but I'll give you a little bit of a look behind the screens. Some things are automated. For example, if you look at the description box of my videos, there's always the same set of links. Like check out my website, check out my merch, that sort of stuff. That is pre-populated. So you put that in, and then every new video you upload, YouTube automatically puts that in. If you want to put in other things, like for example, if a company sends me a pen, I typically put a link to their website in the description. That I have to do for every separate video, of course, right? I can't pre-populate that because every pen video is different. Then I have to set tags at the bottom. I also have to indicate whether the video is made for children or not. And I'm never really sure what to say, but I don't make my videos for children, so I say no. That affects whether you can monetize videos. And for the record, if you think that YouTube makes me rich, you can think again. I really do not get much out of YouTube money. Then I have to set tags. So for example, if I were to review this B.R.E. brown pen, I would put in Leonardo, maybe Appelboom because he sold them, Jonathan Brooks, Carolina Pen Company, steel nib, gold nib, cartridge converter, piston filler, all these kind of tags people could search on. Then I go to the next screen, and I have to do this from the top of my head. I did a couple yesterday, so I might mix up the order a bit, but then I have to indicate what kind of monetization I want. Well, I feel that I do deserve to get something out of my videos because I invest a lot of time in them. But one thing I don't like is videos you can't skip. And one thing I don't like is videos in the middle of the, is ads in the middle of the video. So ads you can't skip, I don't like. Ads in the middle of the video, I don't like because it interrupts the viewer experience. You can make more money if you put those things in, but I don't. Okay, that's it. Then on the next screen, I have to indicate for several things, several topics, whether they are included in my video or not. So does this include violence? Does it include hate speech? Does it include weapons? Does it include swearing? Does it include all those things? I don't have to click separately, but I have to indicate, you can indicate in one go of like, no, none of these things. I have to submit that. So you have to click another button, submit. Then you go to the next screen. The next screen has, I think, some screening tests. They do something, and I believe there is 1 or maybe 2 more screens after that. For sure, there is 1 more screen where you set the video up. So, for example, I want this to be hidden. I want this to be part of a, what do you call that? Sorry, not part of a playlist. That's all in the first screen. But you will indicate, for example, when you want to release the video. And I never set those dates because sometimes I move videos around and then I have to change everything up again. So I just leave them as hidden videos, which you can see because they're already embedded in playlists. If you start playing a playlist, you will see videos that are scheduled but not public yet. Hashtag tips and tricks. Anyway, uploading a single video, not counting the actual time it takes to upload the video file onto YouTube, can easily take 5 minutes. Setting all the tags, copying them so I also have them for the website post, putting in a thumbnail, doing all these things, selecting a thumbnail, all that stuff takes time. And I feel that sometimes people forget about that and they think that if I make a 15-minute video, that's 15 minutes of work. It is not. With research, with taking notes, with editing the video, recording the video, with taking pictures, with uploading on YouTube and going through all these screens, with creating a concomitant website post, it's a lot of work. And this is not a complaint. I'm just saying this is a reason why I sometimes get annoyed when people then complain incessantly about, oh, this angle is not good, oh, this lighting. I'm doing what I can. I give you videos that you can watch for free, so maybe you get what you get. Okay, so has my way of uploading videos or promoting videos changed? Not so much because of YouTube, but it has changed because of social media. When I started doing my videos, Instagram did not yet exist. Yeah, there was Twitter, I'm pretty sure, but there was no Instagram. There was also no Snapchat, there was no TikTok. Yes, children, we're that old. Now, that means certain things. My preferred social media platform is Instagram. I like Instagram best. That means that I post, whenever I have a new video, I post that on Instagram. When I started, I couldn't do that because Instagram didn't exist. YouTube used to automatically tweet my videos. I now have to do that manually. That's another step that takes time. Think about it. You have to click a tweet button, you have to write a little mess, you have to click. All that stuff adds up, right? So, again, it's not a complaint. I choose to do this. But do understand the amount of time involved in creating a single video. It's a lot. And I get paid maybe a quarter of minimum wage per hour for that work. So there is that. Okay, next question. In your VAC 700 disassembly line video, I don't understand how you got the nib unit out of the section that easily, because it's hard for me. Well, that can happen. When you're dealing with a TWSBI pen, you're dealing with a feed that is incredibly soft, and that plastic tends to break on the underside. So here, for example, this is not a TWSBI, but you see where you have this feed, you have those fins or cones there, those little thin things. They are very, very fragile on TWSBI, and they typically break when you just look at them the wrong way. So when you are trying to remove a nib unit on a TWSBI pen, you have to be extremely careful. Now, having said that, what I like to do is try to not squeeze the nib and feed this way, but try to squeeze them sideways so you don't damage those, call them what you like, fins, combs, etc. An easy way to do it is to simply use lubrication. Do something. Now, don't start rubbing silicone grease or Vaseline in there, but use water. Draw up water. This is a trick I learned from Paul Rutte from Akkerman in The Hague. He said when you have trouble with that sort of stuff, just make sure you put in water. So, VAC 700, you would use the vacuum mechanism, just pull up water. You can leave that in overnight. You can even leave the pen in a cup of water. It's not going to destroy the pen. Afterwards you can clean it, dry it out, do all those things. Cartridge converter filled pen, same thing. Piston filled pen, same thing. Draw up some water. Don't leave it in there for weeks. The water may evaporate. There may be minerals, etc. No, I'm just talking about one night, and maybe don't do it if you have an ebonite pen. Ebonite is different because ebonite can't handle water so well, but this is a VAC 700. Simple plastic is no problem. If everything in the inside of that pen is wet, it's much easier to pull things out. Yeah. So do that. Put in some water, and then it can still be difficult, but that can help. Finally, I do sell things on my website, sort of like little B.R.E. Brown grips, I call them. It's sort of rubberized material, and you can grab things with that, and they slip less. Be careful though, because that also allows you to break things more easily, because you can exert a bit more pressure, right? But that could help. But you can also I would just try water first. Okay, third question, the penultimate one. Pilot tank or Kakuno both have angular sections. Well, I really don't know what to say. These are two fairly different pens. The Kakuno is much girthier than the Pilot tank. I think this is a matter of whatever you prefer. Like that's a preferential thing. The tank is slimmer, narrow, more shaped like a typical pen, and as a result, that will be like that. It'd be a more typical pen. I don't know if I have much to say about that beyond that specific thing. When people ask me to choose between two pens, it's very difficult. I mean, there's so much user preference involved in that I don't know. Okay. Final question. This came from a kind person who said, I am also a professor, and like you, I probably have to grade a lot of papers on paper of not the greatest quality. Could you do a video on that? I gave it thought to dedicate a whole video to that, and I chose not to, and I'll tell you why. It's not because I can't be bothered, but it's because my fear is that I can come up with recommendations of pens and ink combinations, but if you don't have those, I don't know how useful that is. Ink is not so much a problem because ink is typically fairly affordable, especially the types of inks I'm going to mention here. But with specific pens, I may recommend something that you don't have or that's not available or whatever. So I thought I would do it this way. The laws of common sense dictate that finer and drier nibs paired with drier inks work best on paper of poor quality. I'm sure you had figured this out because you're a professor, so we're on the same page. But the question is, what exactly, right? What can you give specific examples? Well, yeah. I have actually found that I can grade student papers written on standard copier paper with broad nibs, but then I think a bit about the ink. So, let me talk about that. The finer the nib, the less ink typically flows out of that nib, the less feathering you get on poor paper because there is less wetness on the page. Yeah? This stands to reason. Now, what are some dry inks? Now, let's first, sorry, I got ahead of myself. What are some dry nibs? Well, again, the finer, the better typically. So anything you have with a finer nib will be okay. But even then, I have some medium nibs that are really quite wet, and then I have some medium nibs that write like fines, and then I have some medium nibs that are quite dry. For a simple, standard, easy nib, I find the Lamy Safari nibs very helpful. Their extra fines are sometimes fines, sometimes mediums, and sometimes extra fines, but if you look past that, if you get a decent extra fine or fine, it typically works fairly well. And I also had a Lamy Safari nib in broad once that really was a fire hose. It was incredibly wet, so there are no guarantees. I think more important than that, I'm sure you're not going to grade a paper with a triple broad nib because it's also not going to fit. That's the other issue, right? If you try to write comments, then, well, then that won't work because it won't fit. You got that part as well, I'm sure. Then what about inks? Well, I found that there are certain inks that are just very good and that work very well for this purpose. First of all, any Waterman ink. The Waterman inks do not have the most pizzazz-filled range of color. They're really standard. Their green is green, their red is red, their purple is purple. They're not groundbreaking color palettes, but each and every one of them is well behaved and cleans out of pens well in my experience. Even their turquoise cleans out of pens pretty easily. Waterman Florida Blue, Serenity Blue, the ink formerly known as Florida Tifcaf, is a wonderful ink. It takes a lot for that ink to feather. It cleans out of pens beautifully, and it doesn't have that very bright blue hue that many washable blues have, even though it is a washable blue. I love that ink, and that's an ink It's one of the few inks I have really drained full bottles of. I use it a lot. I use it a lot when I review because it cleans out of pen so well. So that's an ink you could look into. Now, the problem, of course, is it's a washable blue. So, if a student knocks over a cup of coffee over their paper, there may be bigger issues, but your notes may be gone. So there are other inks that you could look into. There are permanent inks. B.R.E makes document inks. Montblanc has permanent inks. With those inks, I've talked about those in Consult the Doctor many times, make sure you clean your pens well. They are permanent, so clean your pens well. Don't leave those inks in pens for 6 months in a desk drawer. But they are waterproof, and I found they dry fairly quickly. So that can be helpful as well. Another ink that I like, I don't really like to use red when I grade papers. This is for pedagogical reasons. I don't want to make it seem like something is wrong. I want to make it seem like something can be improved, so I don't use a traditional red. But I will say both Montblanc Corn Poppy Red and also Schaefer Script, which is cheaper, I think, pretty sure, and is maybe easier to get. Montblanc inks, not everyone carries them. Great red inks that work very well, including on cheaper paper. Now, if you want to do something fancy, Gerbin Lit d'été, great dry ink. Will not give you the greatest flow, but it will be very dry and therefore it will not feather quickly. And I have graded a lot of papers. This is the final thing I'll say about this topic. I've graded a lot of papers with B.R.E Brown. And the reason for that is not megalomania, but is simply that is my ink, and I can tell immediately if someone tampered with the notes on the paper or the exam. Because no student will have a ballpoint that writes in that shade. That even if they have a fountain pen, they're unlikely to have that shade of ink. So from a fraud perspective, which is for me not a huge concern because I usually, like, you would also have to imitate my handwriting, right? But that's an additional layer of things. And honestly, I found B.R.E Brown to do pretty well on copier paper. No ink is perfect. My ink is certainly not perfect, but I found it to work fairly well and not be super prone to feathering. So that's another consideration. There you have it. These were the 4 questions I had today. I want to emphasize again, in the first question, I was not trying to complain. That was not what I was trying to do, but I did want to give you a realistic view of fairly how much work this is. And I think once in a while it's good to point that out. Not to garner respect or anything, but just to make people realize this is actually quite a lot of work. And that's all there's to it. I hope this was useful. If you have questions, leave them below and I'll get to them as soon as I can. You can also email them. If you don't get an email back, then you know that this is going to end up in a Consult the Doctor one day. Anyway, hope this was useful and I'm glad to see you later. Bye.